Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the mask on one of the most mysterious and, honestly, influential forces of the digital age, the hacker collective known as Anonymous.
You've definitely seen the headlines, right? The Guy Fawkes masks, the threats made, and that creepy computerized voice. They've been called everything: activists, pranksters, terrorists, heroes, sometimes all in the same week.
Okay, so let's really dive into this, because the story of Anonymous doesn't start with some grand political revolution. Nope, it starts with chaos, with jokes, and a corner of the internet that was basically designed for maximum absurdity. To really get Anonymous, you have to understand where it was born. And we're not talking about some secret headquarters. We're talking about a chaotic, completely unfiltered image board called 4chan. Just try to picture this, a place with literally no identity, no rules, and no memory. Threads just vanish if they aren't popular. The only real goal is to grab attention. And the best way to do that? Through shock, through humor, and just pure, unadulterated weirdness. So this digital petri dish was the breeding ground for a ton of the internet memes you know and love today. But its other main export was trolling, the art of making someone angry online, not for any real cause, but simply for the fun of it, or as they put it, for the lulz. One of their first big, coordinated actions shows this mindset perfectly. They all swarmed a children's online game, not to make some political statement, but just to cause absolute chaos and see what they could get away with. They wanted to show how powerful their numbers were, and to them, how kind of ridiculous it was for people to get so mad over pixels on a screen. But then, a new target popped up who provoked the hive in a totally new way. What started as just another trolling campaign against a neo-Nazi radio host who made the mistake of insulting their community, well, it quickly spiraled into something much, much bigger. This was a real turning point, where online pranks started bleeding into the real world with some very serious consequences. This was the exact moment the collective realized its power wasn't just for jokes anymore. They figured out they could organize, they could escalate, and they could completely dismantle a public figure they decided was a worthy target. I mean, going from prank calls to exposing an FBI informant, this was the first time Anonymous really tasted tangible power outside of the internet. So then, in 2008, that newfound power found a target so big, it would literally transform Anonymous from this chaotic internet subculture into a full-blown global activist movement. It all kicked off when the Church of Scientology tried to scrub this, well, let's call it a very intense Tom Cruise interview from the web, and in doing so, they basically made a classic internet mistake. By trying to censor the video, they triggered something called the Streisand effect, where trying to hide something only makes it way, way more popular. And, well, they provoked the full wrath of 4chan. And then a video appeared online with this chilling message, all delivered by a synthesized voice. This just perfectly illustrates the transformation. See, this wasn't for the lulz anymore. This was a declaration of war against what they saw as censorship, and it became their global rallying cry. And suddenly, the so-called internet nerds were out on the streets. I'm talking Sydney, London, Los Angeles. Thousands of people showed up wearing that mask from V for Vendetta, turning this digital idea into a very physical and very public presence. But, this fight had real consequences. This number you're looking at represents the prison sentence an 18-year-old anonymous member named Brian got for his role in the DDoS attacks on Scientology's websites. The game was officially over. The stakes were now incredibly high. All right, so let's keep this going because after Scientology, Anonymous basically leveled up. They set their sights on global politics. And believe me, the targets got a whole lot bigger. So the group's scope just exploded. In 2010, they launched Operation Payback, attacking huge companies like PayPal and Visa because they blocked donations to WikiLeaks. They framed it as a fight for free information. But then, just a year later, during the Arab Spring, their mission got even more direct. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about lives. They were actively working to keep information flowing in and out of Egypt after the government hit the internet kill switch. Now, this quote from a member is really interesting because it shows just how profound that shift in motivation was. That old, detached, ironic trolling from back in the day, it was gone. It was replaced by this deep, emotional investment in real-world struggles. They weren't just fighting for some abstract idea anymore. They were watching people die.
70,000. That's how many emails anonymous hackers just ripped from the servers of an intelligence contractor called HB Gary Federal. And what was their crime? Well, its CEO made a fatal mistake. He went on TV and boasted that he was going to unmask their leadership. Anonymous took that as a personal challenge. I mean, the hack was an absolutely stunning act of retaliation. The emails they stole exposed this whole corporate plot to use disinformation and cyber attacks to undermine journalists and activist groups. It was like perfect poetic justice, right? Anonymous used a hack to expose a company that sold hacking services.
But here's the thing. As the group's power and fame grew, its greatest strength, this leaderless, chaotic nature, also started to become its greatest weakness. The whole thing began to fracture from the inside. So this splinter group called lulzsec popped up, and they were basically tired of all the political stuff. They wanted to go back to the old ways, hacking for the sheer fun and chaos of it. So they attacked anyone and everyone, including media outlets, which a lot of people in the core anonymous movement thought was a huge no-no, a violation of their free speech principles.
And this spectrum really captures the whole essence of Anonymous, doesn't it? Were they digital Robin Hoods fighting for the little guy? Or were they just anarchists who wanted to watch the world burn? The truth is, depending on who you asked and on what day it was, they could be all three. Of course, the more famous they got, the more law enforcement started to pay attention. And the whole thing came down to this one huge question. Is a DDoS attack, what they called a digital sit-in, a legitimate form of protest? Or is it just a crime? For dozens of members, the answer came in the form of an FBI raid at 6 in the morning. You know, this quote from an activist really gets to the heart of the anonymous legacy. The internet gives these small groups of people this unprecedented power. And whether that power becomes a force for good or for evil, it really depends entirely on the choices of these nameless, faceless people.
In the end, Anonymous is kind of like a mirror, right? It reflects the chaos, the power, and all the moral ambiguity of the internet itself. And the central question it leaves us with is one we are absolutely still grappling with today. Where do we draw the line between protest and crime, and who gets to decide?